everybody. How's it going out there? Welcome. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining me in a location that looks far nicer than the place I will ultimately live. This is just a place I'm in for a bit. Would be nice if this were mine. Wouldn't it be? Just to have that many trees around it's so rare these days. You see a tree? I saw a tree the other day. I was like, look at that, hanging in there, still fighting. God, I'm so dark so quick. I got a lot for you today, as I always do. I'm going to get into Chris Hedges, the incomparable Chris Hedges, revealing how to fight the oppressors and why the oppressors must be fought, and we must unite to do that. You know, isn't that a crazy idea? Working together to fight against the tiny cabal. And I'm sorry if that name sounds paranoid, but they are a cabal. They're a tiny group of people that own the systems, that own the levers of power. And we should be joining together to fight them rather than fighting each other about nonsense. I'm going to show you an MSNBC clip or an NBC clip where of one of our great senators, one of our great politicians, remembering like halfway through the interview that he was supposed to say that our wars are about freedom and democracy and not about other things. Halfway through, he's like, I mean, freedom and democracy. Oh, shit. Like someone slipped him a card and he was like, freedom and democracy. Just remembered. I'm also going to talk about how yet another of Forbes' 30 under 30, the 30 most influential entrepreneurs, the people, the movers and shakers in this capitalist system, the people who even under the age of 30 have figured out how to exploit and extract resources and wealth out of others. Yet another one is now in prison. This seems to be a common theme of the movers and shakers on Forbes' list. But of course, it's not about Forbes. It's about how this system works. Biden is the Biden administration is Biden and his handlers, which are, let's be honest, it's elder care nurses. Biden and his elder care nurses have just put out a new decision on what to do about the Colorado River, which is disappearing. Gone. The Colorado River is, which it seems to be a kind of important thing. The Colorado River. Also, it's been there for like thousands of years. Tearing through the landscape, creating the Grand Canyon. And here we've managed to suck it dry in the matter of a few generations. Also, Biden's auto emissions completely missed the mark on dealing with any kind of climate emergency. All of that I'm going to get into and much more. So let's get started. Please take a second to click subscribe, click thumbs up, share it with people. All of those things would be great because, I am incredibly suppressed. I am one of the most censored comedians in America, one of the most censored journalists, although there's obviously journalists that have been imprisoned by America, like Julian Assange, who has now been in Belmarsh for 4 years. That anniversary just came up. Do all that. Please share it. And let's get going. I want to start off with this clip, even though this is not the title of the episode, but this clip is truly amazing. It's on Meet the Press. It's Chuck Todd. Now Chuck Todd is a lying piece of shit. He's propaganda. He's one of the top propagandists for our military oil company with the military that we call a country. He's one of the top propagandists for them. On NBC News, on Meet the Press, on MSNBC. He's been around for years and years doing this shit. However, this one actually, he ends up being, I don't know about the good guy, but being the more accurate spokesperson here. But even a blind squirrel finds your nuts sometimes, or finds their nuts, even a blind squirrel finds someone else's nuts. So no, it's got to be your nuts. Don't quote me on that. But so he stumbled upon a correct questioning of a senator, and This has to do with Taiwan. As most of you know, we're trying to do the same thing with Taiwan that we did with Ukraine, turn it into a proxy war between us and China, as opposed to Ukraine's proxy war between us and Russia. We're trying to do the same thing, drain China's resources, separate them from the world community. All of those things we're trying to do with the proxy war in Ukraine. We're now shifting to some degree to Taiwan. And so that's the real reason. That's the heart of it. Of course, Chuck Todd would never say anything like that. But anyway, this is Senator Michael McCall. And anyway, enjoy.
Make the basic case for why Americans not only should care about what happens in Taiwan, but should be willing to spill American blood and treasure to defend Taiwan.
Nobody wants that. I think the deterrence is key here. We traveled to Japan, South Korea. We are in Guam. We are meeting with our allies, our partners here, if you will. They don't have a NATO in the Pacific, but they do have partners. We want to make sure that they are ready and supportive of the United States and Taiwan. The case for Taiwan, that's a very good question. About 50% of international trade goes through the international straits, but I think more importantly, Chuck, is that the TSMC manufactures 90% of the advanced global supply of advanced semiconductor chips. If China invades and either owns or breaks this, we're in a world of hurt, globally.
Congressman, it almost sounds like the case that would be made in the 60s, 70s, and 80s of why America was spending so much money and military resources in the Middle East. Oil was so important for the economy. Is this sort of the 21st century version of that?
I personally, I think it's about democracy and freedom.
Make the basic.
Now, I do want to point out, Chuck Todd still had to do a little bit of, mainstream propaganda there. 60s, 70s, 80s, he said, sounds like blood for oil. Of course, he didn't put it in quite those terms, but 60s, 70s, 80s, what about today? Nothing going on in the Middle East with the U.S. today. Furthermore, it is a bit of U.S. propaganda, the idea that we invaded and destroyed those countries just for oil. The real reason is the petrodollar, not the petro. We actually didn't steal all that much oil from Iraq, for example. The reason we needed to turn Iraq into a failed state or a puppet state was because they were going around the petrodollar. So that is the real goal, more so than the oil. That doesn't mean we don't steal some oil. But again, this is so you have our mainstream media doing a little bit of a propaganda by actually acting like it was just blood for oil. But yes, for some reason, I noticed some of you are pointing this out. That guy looks like his head is like busting out of his his collar somehow. It is some sort of marionette puppet that has strangled his head into his suit. It's really fucking creepy. But anyway, so this guy is asked, why should, and again, you want more of the U.S. Chuck Todd propaganda. He says, why should Americans be willing to spill blood and oil for Taiwan? Now, the real way to say that blood and oil is it's like a cute little, we've spent too much blood and oil. It's a cute little way of saying, why should we be willing to kill fucking thousands of innocent people? Like this is how it should be said at that timbre. Okay. I want to change in timbre of our mainstream media. It should be said, why the fuck would we, and even if they can't say fuck, why the fidgety habits would we kill thousands of people? Both our soldiers who don't know why the fuck they're there and innocent people we're bombing. Why would we ever do that? It should be squeaky. It should be, the eyes should go like this. Instead, you have our mainstream media, which the most they would ever push back on this shit would be what you just saw. Chuck Todd going, well, why would Americans, why would they want to spend blood and oil in Taiwan? Make the case for turning it into some sort of like academic sounding rather than massive war crimes, massive crimes against humanity, just disgusting pieces of shit. So even by making it sound a little professorial, Chuck Todd is still doing the bidding of the corporate elite. He's still a courtesan, even in this clip where he's ostensibly kind of the good guy. But then you have the even more right-wing fucking idiot here, Michael McCauley, Michael McCall, who says it's about semiconductors. It's we really Americans should be willing to see their children die, and of course killing innocent civilians in Taiwan, but no one cares about them. But we're willing to see their children die as we send them over there to fight over semiconductors, is what it is. And then Chuck Todd goes, "Oh, it sounds a lot like what we do in the Middle East for oil." And then he goes, "Democracy, freedom." I meant democracy, freedom. Democracy, freedom. Democracy, freedom. Democracy, freedom. I meant democracy, freedom. All right, I want to see just the end of this clip one more time. That's just the democracy, freedom part.
Globally.
Congressman, it almost sounds like the case that would be made in the 60s, 70s, and 80s of why America was spending so much money and military resources in the Middle East. Oil was so important for the economy. Is this sort of the 21st century version of that?
I personally, I think it's about democracy and freedom.
Really? A minute ago, you said semiconductors. Now you're saying democracy, freedom, democracy, freedom, freedocracy. It's about freedocracy. Yeah, that's what it. Freedomocracy. Okay, let's move on. But I do love that even in this clip. I picked this clip because I wanted to show him being like democracy, freedom. But even in this clip where Chuck Todd is getting it right, I know I've kind of already said this, but he still feels the need to say it's 70s and 80s. It sounds like what we did in the 70s and 80s, before I was in the mainstream media, back in those days. Dude, you are doing the propaganda exactly the same now. Fuck Todd or Tuck Chad or whatever your name is. You are doing it exactly the same as they did it back then. You're just actually doing it more because we're actually at war with far more countries now than we were then, especially if you count economic war. And so, yeah, you're doing it too, you piece of human garbage. So both of these people are pieces of human garbage. McCall might be slightly more because you can notice his garbage is actually busting out of its bag. It's actually spurting out of the garbage bag like so he's maybe a little worse. I don't know. Actually, Chuck Todd's been manufacturing consent for war for far longer than McCall has been in Congress, I'm sure. Anyway, so I wanted to do that one. Please, by the way, folks, leave comments whether you have something to say or not. It helps me in my ongoing battle against the algorithm. Every day they're changing it. And of course, I am one of the most censored comedians in the nation. My entire large YouTube channel, 250,000 just banned globally. Over 2,000 videos banned globally, the digital equivalent of book burning. And I keep doing this, and I hope you'll help support it at leecamp.net and leave a comment in whatever platform you're watching on. Leave a comment. It helps with the battle against the algorithms. But all right, so we are, and in case I didn't mention it, the real reason we're in Middle East and all of these things has to do with petrodollar, but I've done plenty of that coverage in the past few weeks, so I'm going to skip over that. I'll probably end up mentioning it again here on this live stream. We're in the middle of a battle. We're in the middle of a large-scale class war in which the money, the life force, the comfort, the security has all been sucked out of the middle class, the lower middle class, the poor in this country. And no one says it better than Chris Hedges, or very few do. And so Hedges, I wanted to read some of this Hedges article and comment on it. It's so brilliantly put, and it's got a lot of great numbers that people should know, should remember, and it reminds us that we should be joining together in so many ways to fight this class war rather than to let it fight us, rather than to let it tear us apart. We should be joining together in this fight. Chris Hedges says, we are undergoing the most vicious class war in U.S. history. Social inequality has reached its most extreme levels of disparity in over 200 years, surpassing the rapacious greed of the era of the robber barons. The legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government, along with the media and universities, have been seized by a tiny cabal of billionaires and corporations who pass laws and legislation that consolidate their power and obscene wealth at our expense. And something just to add in here, he's not just making up that this is actually the most extreme inequality that this country has ever seen, maybe that any country has ever seen, but they actually have a mathematical analysis of inequality. It's called the Gini coefficient, not Genie, but Gini. And it'd be kind of cooler if it was called the Gini coefficient, like Genie in a bottle. But it's called the Gini coefficient, and our Gini coefficient right now in the United States is actually worse than ancient Rome before its collapse. It's actually worse here in the United States because ancient Rome didn't have anybody like someone with $200 billion in their bank account. They did not have an equivalent for that. They could not imagine such an equivalent. Whereas we have 3 people with the same amount of wealth as the bottom 50% of the fucking country. 3 people. You cannot have a sustainable system with that kind of inequality. It is impossible. We are at the very end of the Jenga game where you have just massive wealth at the top and a tiny little single block at the bottom trying to keep it all up, but with backbreaking labor. And what happens at the end of the Jenga game? It all falls down. You try to extract a little bit more. The difference is instead of pulling out whole blocks, now there's one block at the bottom and now they're whittling holes in it slowly. Just whittle here, whittle there. Just drill a little hole like termites. Just slowly waiting until that last piece can't possibly support this. In 1928, the top 1% held about 24% of the nation's income, a percentage that steadily declined until 1973. By the early 1970s, the oligarchy's assault against workers was accelerated in response to the rise of popular mass movements in the 1960s. The billionaire class and corporations poured billions into political parties, academia, think tanks, and the media. Critics of capitalism had difficulty finding a platform, just like now, including on public broadcasting. Those who sang to the tune the billionaires played were lavished with grants, book deals, tenured professorships. That's why I'm not a professor, because I can't say professorships. Awards and permanent megaphones into the commercial press. Wages stagnated. Income inequality grew to monstrous proportions. Tax regs for corporations and the rich were slashed until it culminated in a virtual tax boycott. And of course, all of this continues today. Yes, he's talking about a specific time when this was first implemented, but all of that continues today to be much like, to be what our system is today. It started in the 60s and 70s, like he said, in order to fight against the popular uprising of people saying, hey, what if we work together in a communal way? What if we all join together? What if we had free love? What if we had people having equality, women, LGBT, all of us working together, black and brown and white? What if we had that? And instead of we're going to step on each other's throat in order to make enough money to try and survive? What if we had that first one instead of the second one? And the ruling elite came up with ways to make sure that first option wouldn't happen. And 2 of the most pivotal documents that laid out the game plan, so to speak, called the audible. It was the quarterback in the huddle, and the two most, many people point to them as the two most pivotal documents are the Powell memo and the Trilateral Commission report. The Trilateral Commission report was called A Crisis of Democracy, and basically said that there is too much democracy, that people have too much say in the way this system is functioning. And now, as you've seen, we are now no longer in a crisis of democracy because we do not have one. We are in a crisis of non-democracy. We are in a crisis of zero democracy. The ruling elite no longer worry about democracy. When was the last time you saw Congress really worried about anything the American people wanted? Incredibly rare. Incredibly rare. And so those two, and I've covered them. I covered them on my podcast, Government Secrets. I've covered them in other ways, but very pivotal documents. One coming from a Supreme Court justice. Well, he became a Supreme Court justice after he wrote the Powell memo. And the Trilateral Commission was actually under Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter didn't oversee it, but many in the Carter administration were part of it. And that, and I don't actually want to say that it was Carter who was doing it, but it shows how no matter who the president is, the ruling elite continue to try and craft their game plan to gut the rest of us. That is why we are in such an extreme class war. That we act like hasn't been going on for years and years by the ruling elite. Whenever you hear the term class war mentioned in the press, it's almost exclusively about the non-rich, the non-ruling elite daring to stand up and have worker strikes and have protests. They call that class war, when in fact the class war has really been going on against the rest of us, against all of us for years and years now. And this, Trilateral Commission and the Powell memo did exactly what he's listing here, even though he didn't use those terms. I know he's talked about them in the past, but the billionaire class and corporations poured billions into political parties, academia. They were really worried about college universities, think tanks, and media. Think tanks barely existed back then. They were not that big a deal. Critics of capitalism had difficulty finding a platform, including on public broadcasting. And like I said, this continues today. Critics of capitalism, like myself, have a difficulty finding a platform. I am one of the most suppressed people in this fucking country. I've had people do deep dives into the analytics of even pretty suppressed outlets like Mint Press, where I work. Spoiler alert. I don't know. I was going to say something there. Spoiler alert. I've decided to move on from Mint Press. I love them. They're amazing. But I'm going to be wrapping it up with them in the next couple weeks. April will be my last month with them. This month will be my last month. So, but anyway, Mint Press, incredibly suppressed outlet. But I have had social media people do deep dives and say, actually, the worst suppression that we get is when we use Lee Camp's name and things. So literally, specifically, my name is shadow banned on these outlets, Instagram, Facebook. I don't know if Twitter has one for my name, but and it is because, and there's other, like you guys know, there's other independent media out there that you view as leftist, left wing, as giving you the truth. I won't speak for all of them. Some of them probably are giving you a lot of the truth, but if they aren't regularly saying the word capitalism, then they're probably not nearly as suppressed as what I do. If they're not really getting to the heart of the issue, capitalism, petrodollar, etc., then they might be a little bit suppressed, especially depending on the titles. If the title says U.S. empire creates terrorism, those type of things, then yeah, I'm not saying they aren't suppressed, but there are people that are multi-millionaires who seemingly have many of the same stances as I do, but aren't saying the word capitalism regularly. And so if you leave the actual deep, dark monster alone, if you leave the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, if you leave that curtain closed and you let him be back there while you say, those witches, those evil witches, the bad ones, they're fucked up. Look, that's not wrong. That's not wrong. The evil witches are fucked up. But if you leave the dude behind the curtain, then they will not suppress you nearly as much. But as Hedges is saying, critics of capitalism were not allowed on these networks and got drummed out, even going back to the 70s and 80s. Chomsky being a good example of someone who used to have, for a while, had a platform to some degree on NPR and the others, and they slowly drummed him out. Today, the top 10% of the richest people in the United States own almost 70%. Sorry, a small penis is driving by. Maybe you could hear it. Today, the top 10% of the richest people in the United States own almost 70% of the country's total wealth. The top 1% control 32% of the nation's wealth. The bottom 50% of the U.S. hold, you ready for it? 3% of the U.S. wealth. The bottom 50% hold 3% of America's wealth. Many people own zero. Many people are in negative in this country now. These ruling oligarchs have us, not to mention the natural world, in a death grip. And the natural world is such an incredible point to make. It's not just us that suffer. It is the natural world. We are... One of the stories I'm hoping to get to, although I've used a half an hour on this one already. Oh, no, that's right. I had the MSNBC story first. But one of the stories I'm getting to a little later is the Colorado River's disappearing. And Biden administration has just decided to do something about it, which is not nearly enough and not specifically in the right directions. Anyway, these ruling oligarchs have us, not to mention the natural world, in a death grip. They have mobilized the organs of state security, militarized the police, built the largest prison system in the world, and deformed the courts to criminalize poverty. We are the most spied upon, watched, photographed, and monitored population in human history. And I covered the Stasi state in East Germany. That's obviously Hedges saying that, not me. I wasn't there. When the corporate state watches you 24 hours a day, you cannot use the word liberty. This is the relationship between a master and a slave. And this is such another important point, is that people think they have freedom right now in America. You have a lot of the right wing talking about, and the center and the liberals, and, because they're all right wing. They just don't realize it. Liberals don't realize that they're still standing for mostly right wing policies. But they're all talking about freedom all the time. We're losing our freedoms. We're I'm not saying, I've never said that sentence, but we're losing. But they love to say that. We have a lot of our freedoms we have already lost. It's already gone. You cannot be surveilled as much as we are and call it liberty. You should have a freedom of privacy, which we do not have any longer. So to call it liberty when you can't sleep on a bench in a city, I mean, then there's the factor of why should you have people sleeping on benches? But when you can't sleep somewhere without having a guy with a gun poke you and say, move it along, where you can't have a beer out on a sidewalk without being arrested sometimes, when you can't drive a car around without many people fearing they may get shot by a man with a gun and a badge, that's not a freedom. When you have one of the largest prison states in the world, if it helps communicate this at all, switch into Jeff Foxworthy's You Might Be a Redneck. If you have one of the largest prison states in the world, you might be a draconian empire. You might be a fascist state. If you have a situation where you go 5 miles over the speed limit and a guy with a gun and a badge pulls you over and you don't know if you're going to be shot or locked up for years, it might be in a fascist state. I don't know if that helped communicate. Did that help people figure it out? It is one of the great ironies, Chris Hedges says, that this corporate state needs the abilities of the educated, intellectuals, and artists to maintain power. This is such an important point. Artists are now used in order to maintain this sick, corrupted, dying system. To continue from him, intellectuals and artists to maintain power. Yet the moment any begin to think independently, they are silenced. Not to mention any specifically I'm sorry, I got something in my throat. Not to talk about any artists specific consider comedy an art, which, you know, I what, me, an artist? Oh, thanks. But yeah, you will be silenced. And of course, Hedges is I don't know that he call himself an artist, but he is, in many ways, he's a poet. But he is a journalist, and he has been silenced equivalently to the way I have. Obviously, his TV show at RT America also shut down. He's kicked out of the New York Times for being anti-Iraq war. He's had his videos digitally burned as well. And so he's been as silenced in many ways as I have. The relentless assault, he continues, on culture, journalism, education, the arts, and critical thinking has left those who speak in the language of class warfare marginalized, frantic Cassandras who are viewed as slightly unhinged and depressingly apocalyptic. Well, okay, Chris, you don't have to call me names. Jesus. Gee, could you back off a little? Frantic. I'm not frantic, except that you show me a video of Chuck Todd, and I'm like, that guy's defending war criminals. And people go, oh, he's a bit frantic. I have never been, what, me, Frank? No, I would never. But as I said, was it in my book? I can't remember if it was in my last book or it's in the upcoming book. But either way, one of my columns, I said, I was accused as a kid of spazzing out too much, quote unquote, spazzing out. And my point is, you look at our reality, you look at our systems breaking down, you look at 2,000 cities with toxic lead in their pipes, you look at the unbreathable air, you look at water disappearing, fresh water disappearing across the country. Should we not all be spazzing out? Should are the people spazzing out not the sane ones? So anyone who wants to call you depressing or apocalyptic or frantic, well, maybe it's time to get frantic. Maybe it's time to have beautiful, beautiful, frantic revolution. Maybe that's what it's time for. I'm not saying it shouldn't be fun. I mean, I'm here for the fun, all right? I'm in revolution for the fun of it, okay? That's why I'm here. I'm here for the laughs. Revolution for the laughs. That's my new motto. I am all for, we need revolutionary change, of a revolution of the mind, because it's fucking fun. That's the only reason, not because of all the other reasons I just listed. Hedges continues. Culture is vital to democracy. It is radical and transformative. It expresses what lies deep within us. It gives words to our reality. It validates the facts of our lives. It makes us feel as well as see. It allows us to empathize with those who are different or oppressed. It reveals what is happening around us. It honors mystery. And again, these are such important words. It's like, those of us who are willing to cover these topics and to make them part of whatever art you or I see as important, whether it be painting or poetry or song or comedy, whatever it is, it allows us to do all of those things. It allows us to define our oppressors. It allows us to unite against our oppressors rather than uniting against each other. I mean, not uniting against each other, rather than turning against each other. Man, if we united against each other, that would be impressive. We are all united to fight each other. And this is what's so angering about the fucking comedians these days that think that their goal in life is to go after already oppressed people, is to go after the LGBT community or trans people or women, or it's like, of all the issues, because most of them don't deny other issues exist, but of all the issues facing this world right now, really, that's what you decide? The fucking tiny percentage of our population that is having that is trans people, that is having their rights taken away. That's your aim. Even if you wanted to sit here and argue with me about those rights in that situation, etc., is that really what we need to discuss? I mean, that is like That is like all of the trees have died around you. Your house is on fire. You're standing out in the front yard and you're like, but you know what really chaps my liver lips, to make up a phrase? You know what really chaps my backside is these men who say they want to wear a dress. And I do call them men because that's what they need to be called. Like, dude, your house just burned. Your kids are inside. Your kids are inside. I don't care about the house burning. You hear me? There's an issue with the bathrooms. I really shouldn't give them a Southern accent because it is far more than Southerners. There's an issue with the bathrooms. I don't know. I do that too much. I pretend everybody who shucks has a Southern accent, even though I'm Southern myself, which is, it's really not fair. It's just, you know, and you never do the reverse, right? You never go, these scientists are making amazing breakthroughs in AI. They're just sitting there in their offices going, we have cracked the code in artificial intelligence, making it so no one will have to work at a slave labor job again. They never do that, right? You never give a scientist a killer Southern accent. Anyway, global capitalists have pumped nearly 37% more greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere since the first convention on climate change in 1992. That's just the ruling elite have pumped 37%. Speak of values and needs. So the way he phrases this, just to clear it up, he's saying, if you dare speak of values and needs, if you speak of moral systems and meaning, if you defy the primacy of profit, especially if you only have the few minutes allotted to you on cable news television show to communicate back and forth in the usual thought-terminating cliches, and it sounds like gibberish to a conditioned public. And God, I related to this one because I have been on countless shows. I used to be on a few mainstream media shows. I was on, as I like to mention, I was on all these shows once because they never wanted to have me back. So I was on Fox News once. I was on MSNBC once. I was on CNN once because they hear what you have to say and they're like, oh, fuck, we can't control this. And it's they knew coming in that I was not like the talking points they generally want, but they think that it's going to be something that fits into their acceptable debate system so that you can come on and you can say America should not be at war, right? Especially Fox News. Fox News loves to have that. They'll come in and they'll say, you should be at, we want that lefty in here. And usually they'll surround you. If you're actually left wing, they'll surround you by 5 right wingers so that they can pretend they're having a debate. And the goal is to have that left winger just destroyed by the debate. Now, if you are saying things that are too accurate and dig at the heart of the systems, as opposed to just saying we shouldn't have war, we shouldn't be at war in Ukraine or something like that, then they won't have you back. They'll still surround you with 5 right wingers, but they won't have you back. Or in CNN's case, they'll surround you with 5 right wingers who claim to be liberals, and they won't have you back. So I've been in these debate shows, and like he says, they are thought destroying. You have to speak in the whole segment is 5 minutes. The first 2 minutes is they're setting it up, and then of the final 3 minutes, you yourself get 30 seconds split up into bits. You have a fucking chunk of speech about this long to try and communicate everything that is wrong with this world. And in many cases it has. I'm not saying I've always done well at it. I think the most effective I've ever been was on Fox News when I called them a parade of propaganda and a festival of ignorance. And you take that little phrase. I knew I'd only have a few seconds to get that out. And you take that little phrase and it defines it all. But that's how you have to speak, because they don't want people thinking. They don't want you sitting there and thinking it through. And by the way, I'm about to get to a story of how much less Americans are now thinking. All right, I'm almost done with this, with the Hedges article. If you want to read it, it's at Sheer Post, sheerpost.com, SCHEERPOST. The United States had the bloodiest labor wars of any industrialized nation, rivaled only by the eradication of organized labor by fascist regimes in Europe. Hundreds of U.S. workers were killed. This history has largely been eliminated in American history books. There'll be a little mention of it here and there, but it's largely been eliminated. Thousands were wounded. Tens of thousands were blacklisted. Radical union organizers such as Joe Hill were executed on trumped-up murder charges, imprisoned like Eugene Debs, who was a 8-time, I believe, presidential candidate, or driven like Big Bill Hayward into exile. Militant unions were outlawed. We have a history of crushing workers in this country that people deny. The history is denied. And Hedges is pointing to it as we have to bring that back. And you've seen an uptick in the people uniting, striking against their corporate masters. You've seen a large uptick in that, and that is why the Fed right now is creating a recession, because they want to harm workers. They want to make unemployment higher so that workers become more desperate, so that workers stop striking and demanding higher wages. Because right now workers are, it's getting worse, but workers are not afraid, as much afraid as the ruling elite like for them to be. And so that's what the Fed's involved in right now. And just to wrap this up, to prevent railroad strikes, which disrupted nationwide commerce in 1877, 1894, and 1922, the federal government passed the Railway Labor Act in 1926. Union members call it the Railway Anti-Labor Act, setting out numerous requirements, including the appointment of a presidential emergency board before a strike could be called. That is why Biden was able to set up a presidential emergency board in July of last year. 1 month later, freight railway workers were forced to accept a contract that excluded any paid sick leave. You probably remember this story from last summer, right? Or a little after. This is why, and I remember at the time, I didn't know about this presidential railroad worker bullshit. I didn't know that existed. And so I remember being like, why does Biden get to decide whether the railway workers railroad workers can strike? I was like, what is yeah, he can talk. He can go out and talk, but why is it his decision? And this is why, because the ruling class had put this into the law in 1926 to make sure railroad workers could not strike again and interrupt commerce. Final paragraph. Our oligarchs are as vicious and tight-fisted as those of the past. They will fight with everything at their disposal to crush the aspirations of workers and the demand for democratic reforms. It will not be a quick and easy battle. But if we focus on the oppressor rather than demonizing those who are also oppressed, if we do the hard work of building mass movements to keep the powerful in check, if we accept that civil disobedience has a cost, including jail time, if we are willing to use the most powerful weapon we have, the strike, we can reclaim our country. And to me, that is such another incredibly important point, that we must fucking unite to fight against the tiny, tiny number, a tiny percentage, the 1%, a tiny number, a tiny cabal that is crushing all of us. And when I say extracting our lifeblood out of us, I mean quite literally. And I mean it in two ways. One is they literally are extracting more blood than any other country, like literal blood. You might have heard me cover it before. We are the largest exporter of paid blood extraction, meaning someone accepts $30 to give over their blood and their blood plasma. And it's incredibly poor people that do it, usually, largely, or at least incredibly poor people that keep coming back. They set it up like a casino where you don't know how much money you're going to get. Often you know what you're getting the first time you donate, but then they'll be like, the next one might be 30, might be 75. So that you, like a casino, keep pulling that rod. Sorry to sound sexual. You keep pulling that rod, hoping something comes out. All right, now it's getting worse. But and people keep donating. Anyway, it's getting off on a tangent. The export of blood that we export is larger than soy or corn now in America. More blood. It's a higher percentage of our exports. So they are literally vampiric. But when I say lifeblood, I also mean it a second way, which is our life, our labor, our efforts. So many people are in jobs they fucking hate, or even just jobs they dislike. It shouldn't be that way. We are in a post-scarcity world. This is, and I'm not pointing to my house because this is not my house, but I just meant look around. We're in a post-scarcity world where there is no reason anyone should need for especially in the richest country in the world, no one should need for a roof over your head, for clothing, for food, for any of these things. And yet we give away a third of our waking hours. Many people give away half of their waking hours in order to secure all those things. Healthcare, obviously, add to that list. Okay, clearly I could have done this for the entire episode, but I'm going to move on. After this next story, I'll be going to justrumble.com/Lee Camp. Also, you can get it at leecamp.net, which will take you to my locals page. But all right, so he was talking about education and how the ruling elite have their attacks on academia in order to make sure that not only are people not working against the ruling elite, against capitalist extraction, they have also taken over the ability to learn as to what's going on here. And I talked about rewriting the history books or ignoring various aspects of the history books, which is a very important aspect of this. But beyond just that, our education system has been gutted compared to what it was in the 60s and 70s. Our free education system, let's say that. It doesn't mean you can't get a good education in this country, but it's largely for those who can spend a shit ton of money. And this speaks to that. American IQ scores have rapidly dropped. And, this is popular mechanics, so they want to make it all scientific and say this is the reverse Flynn effect. But, fuck you and your Flynn effect. I don't know that really matters. It's just people. The IQ is drastically dropped. A Northwestern University study shows a decline in 3 key intelligence testing categories, a tangible example of what is called the reverse Flynn effect. Leading up to the 1990s, IQ scores were consistently going up, but in recent years, that trend seems to have flipped. The reasons for both the increase and the decline are still very much up for debate, and they misspelled the word still as sill, which I feel like proves their point. Even popular mechanics cannot write a correct sentence in the second sentence in their article about IQ scores. That doesn't mean I don't ever misspell anything, but one of my pet peeves is like, dude, can you not pay people enough that they actually are able to edit your fucking copy? Like, yes, I misspell things, but I'm not writing an article for popular mechanics. If I did, I hope that when I send it in, they would have someone really good at making sure it doesn't say sill instead of still. But anyway, everybody's talking about how great the bots are now. Couldn't the number one thing for bots be to actually find spelling errors even when they are an actual word? Obviously, sill is a word. Okay. Tangent again. But so IQs are dropping drastically, IQ scores. And I don't think the reasons are actually up for debate if you actually understand the systems at play here. I would say there are the two of the largest reasons, if not the largest reasons, are because of the intentional gutting of our education system. Those where you would get the top level education are incredibly expensive. Education at top universities is through the roof in terms of cost. And so that is one of the biggest reasons. Public education. I went to public school, and I don't know that I got that great of I feel like everything I learned, honestly, mainly everything I learned came after high school. So, well, no, after college was when I started studying. I started reading the books that actually matter, like Hedges. But you should be in your lower grades. You should be at least taught how to think correctly. And yes, you should also be taught the correct history of America, which we're largely not. Occasionally, if you have one of those edgy teachers, you might get Zins of People History of the United States, which everyone should read. But in general, you're not going to get that. You're going to get the whitewashed history of America, which now even in the better history books, where they at least have made race a very important issue in those history books, not in Florida, but in other not in Florida, Texas, but in other states, but in certain schools, and they now make race an important issue in those books. But it's far more than race that needs to be covered, right? It's like having Kamala Harris as vice president or Barack Obama as president. If you don't change the systems and you don't teach people about how the systems work, then it doesn't fucking matter that you have a black president. It does not fucking matter. So if you teach people a slightly whitewashed history of, or a very whitewashed history of Martin Luther King, rather than ignoring Martin Luther King, like most of my history books in Richmond, Virginia did when I was a kid. If you don't teach the accurate, I mean, if you teach the whitewashed version of Martin Luther King, that doesn't actually help people change our systems. And that's because it is still indoctrination. It is still meant for a grand indoctrination. But you have the gutting of public education because, I'll say the right wing, but really that means both political both political parties, which are two cheeks of the same backside. Patent pending for George Galloway. But if you gut public education in those lower grades, you can then point to public education and say, it's not working. Kids are dumber than ever. It's not working. So therefore, let's privatize it all. And they have privatized a lot of it. Charter schools are, probably more than there's more charter schools than ever in America. I don't know that for certain, but probably. And people are just frothing at the mouth to make money off of educating children, because it is something that everyone wants to be educated, and they know they can suck more money out of you, much as they do with healthcare. And so they are frothing at the mouth to make it more and more expensive to put your kids through these schools, through these schools. Anyway, that's reason one that I'd say people IQ has dropped drastically. Reason two, it probably has to do with the health conditions. You have a health system where life expectancy has gone down. You have a health system where people are afraid to go to the hospital because they can't afford what the outcome will be. They don't want to find out something's wrong because they can't afford to deal with the thing that's wrong. So you have health just plummeting. And then you have the types of foods people are eating, right? People living on Doritos Locos, which is ironic because eating nothing but Doritos actually causes Locos. Causes crazy. So Doritos Locos, yes to that. That's what happens. But the health is a big aspect of all of this. And I think that's another reason that IQ is dropping. But here's one more interesting fact about this. I don't know why they had to, because they're popular mechanics, so they're trying to make it all like nerdy. It's the James Flynn effect. Nah, it doesn't really. Just call it getting dumber. Call it the Flowers for Algernon effect, okay? You don't have to call it the James Flynn effect. The study published in the journal Intelligence. So see, that's the only way you get your study published in Intelligence is by pretending it's an effect. Okay, so here is of the areas of intelligence. Let's see, the service of in order to examine if and how cognitive ability scores were changing over time, the data showed drops in logic and vocabulary, visual problem solving and analogies, and computational and mathematical abilities. Could you imagine losing ability in analogies? I mean, that would be like, it would be like, so if you're losing your ability to create analogies, it would be like, so like if you had two, it'd be like, I don't know what it would be like, losing your ability to create analogies. Yeah, I actually don't know what it'd be like. If anyone didn't get that joke, then you're part of the problem. So, but here's the thing. The one area of intelligence that has gone up is spatial reasoning, known as 3D rotation. And they're like, we don't know why that is. Why is it everything's gone down except for spatial reasoning and 3D rotation? And this is so obvious. I think maybe I'm fucking wrong, but it's because we're all fucking online all day. We're all looking at screens all day. That benefits our spatial reasoning because we're interacting with things in a new way than we used to. We're seeing, like, spatially, you see things rotate on screens, and you shrink things down, and you zoom in on Google Maps and all that shit. It's like, that's why that's the one going up. Everything else is going down because we're fucking idiots. So call it the fucking idiot effect. All right. But the reason I wanted to cover that story, even though I normally just cover political socioeconomics. I mean, it is socio, but the reason I wanted to cover that story is because it's by design. Americans are getting dumber by design, and it is useful for them. And in fact, the first story, the story before that about Hedges, written by Hedges, points to the ruling elite saying they wanted to decrease intelligence. They had a crisis of democracy. They needed people to be less informed, and they have achieved that. So this is by design. Now, popular mechanics won't tell you it's by design, but it's fucking by design. All right, I'm going on to the next story about, let's see, which one do we have time for? All right. I'll squeeze in the one about Biden dealing with the Colorado River, but also I'm going to talk about how some of the youngest, most influential entrepreneurs in America are ending up behind bars. And I'm going to show you the new episode of the Most Censored News, which is about how Monsanto's evil has not ended. People think that Monsanto is gone. It's fucking not. So all of that is coming up now at rumble.com/Lee Camp. Please join me there. It's free to join. To go watch. And here's the link. You can also join me if you want to support me and you want to see these videos continue. Join up at leecamp.net. That's leecamp.net. That'll take you to my locals page. Or if you're on Rumble, you just click the red button. I believe it says join. Let's do it. All right. Few more minutes here before I show you the new Most Censored News episode on how